All right, we're live, everyone. We've got quite a few people joined already. I'm going to give it a few more minutes until we get a full house, and so just talk amongst yourselves until then, and you can just watch me getting ready. We had about 120 RSVPs, which was good. So thank you for those who have joined already. For those of you who have joined already, before everyone else gets here, you can throughout the video, the stream, you can put comments in your YouTube feed, and you can say hi, you can ask a question, and the people in the panel who are going to come will be able to answer those for you as well. So I believe David Stokes is already there saying hello, so hi David. Okay, I'm going to get into it because the intro is not that interesting bit. I did realize this is our second one. This is our second live stream that we've done since the COVID thing happened, and I realized after I did the first one that I didn't even introduce myself. And if you're a first time to ProductTank, you would have had no idea what ProductTank was all about. You just joined a stream that you thought might have been interesting. So I'm going to do an intro, which will be short. My name's Andrew Tokley. People call me Tokes. I've been for the last 2.5, almost 3 years now, been an independent product leadership coach. So I work with individuals and businesses to help them be and create environments for effective product leadership, and have worked with about 35 companies in that time across New Zealand, and worked with some amazing people. So before that, I spent about 6 years at Xero. I was there from 2009 and saw them grow from, I think my story I used to tell is I saw them grow from 40 people to 1,400 in that period of time, and was one of the first product managers hired and sort of grew that practice through that time. So that was a huge learning and amazing journey. And then I jumped into a startup for a couple of years, creating holograms, so something totally different, but learned a whole lot of other things while I did that. So really enjoyed the craft of product leadership, but also the practice of leading people who are leading. And so I've taken that into my business to try and help people do that more effectively. Good to see a whole lot of people joining. So, oh, hi Ant, how you going? Good to see you. Few faces and names I haven't seen before maybe in there. So if this is your first time to a ProductTank, we meet pretty much every month. We normally meet in person. Obviously, we haven't been able to do that for the last 6 weeks or so. When we get together, we talk about all things product, and we have a pretty broad remit about what that means. So it could be an individual coming up and talking about something they're doing as a product leader, or it could be a panel like we're going to have today. And so really we're there for anyone who's interested in product leadership in general. And so that could be a CEO, could be designers, could be product managers, product owners. We have a wide range of people, and that's kind of represented in the panel that we're going to have today. We've got people from some of the larger organizations you'll have heard of. We've got someone who's got a design role, someone in UX, someone who's a commercial director, which I'm not really sure what that means, but I'm sure David will tell us what it means. But he's certainly got a product head on his shoulder. And so it's great for people who just want to hear about how effective product leadership works. So that's all I'm going to say, and I'm going to bring in everybody now into the stream. And so we've got Car. I'll do it one at a time because I have all this control. Car, why don't you say hi and let everyone know who you are.
Hi everyone, my name is Ka Chan. I'm the lead product designer for a email marketing company called SailThru. We have offices in New York, New Zealand, LA, and London, where we sort of serve media e-commerce clients, CNBC, the WWE, BuzzFeed, Tory Burch, that sort of thing.
Awesome. All right, hey, welcome aboard. I'll bring on Ruth now. So hi Ruth, good to see you again. You want to tell everyone, give a 50,000-foot view of who you are?
Hi, I'm Ruth. I work at Xero as the heading up the design research team. I've only been at Xero since just before Christmas. I spent a good chunk of the last decade before that at TradeMe doing a pretty similar job.
Excellent, welcome. David.
Hey, good afternoon, folks. Yeah, David Morrison, Commercial Director at Internet New Zealand. Internet New Zealand, we're a not-for-profit membership-based organisation, best known for operating the .nz domain name space. So we've got about 712,000 domain names. And my role is ultimately around bringing in and strengthening the revenue streams for Internet New Zealand so that we can do more public good through our social enterprise activities. And a big part of that's diversifying our revenues into new products and services, which is a big focus for me, and been building up a product team over the last year to support that.
Wicked. And finally, we've got Nicole. Hi, Nicole.
Hi, everyone. I'm Nicole Williams. I work at TradeMe as their product. I'm currently in our marketplace area, which is an area I started working in about a week before we went into level 4. So it's been a pretty interesting time.
Awesome. Hey, thanks everyone. So the other thing I didn't is why the hell we're here and what we're going to be talking about. I thought that the idea behind this, getting this group together for me was really to broaden the conversation about the inevitable impact that COVID is having on all of us, and to I've heard lots of commentary and I've read lots about how remote teams are working, and how we're all using Zoom, and how Slack's amazing, and so those things we're all adapting to. But to be honest, we've been doing a lot of those things for a while now as a tech community. And yes, there's some 100% remoteness, and we'll touch on those things. But I think there's some other really interesting things to discover and explore and talk about in terms of what else is impacting us because of this new reality that we're working in. And so what I'm going to get everyone to do as a bit of a setup is to, and I'll go first, is to sort of tell a little bit of a personal story about how your world has changed, how you're adapting to what's happening around you, and just how you're feeling, just to give a bit of a human element to it. So I can, my story overlaps a little bit with Ruth's actually, because Ruth and I, with a group of people, were hiking down Milford Sound and on the Kepler track, somewhat oblivious to what was happening around us, and somewhat oblivious of the challenge, the risk we were putting ourselves, being in 50-person huts with a whole lot of tourists at the time. We didn't quite realize how dangerous that might have been. And so we emerged from the wilderness to turn our phones on and find out that sure enough, New Zealand had some COVID cases. Things were getting serious. People were getting worried. For me personally, before I went on that tramp, work was looking great. My business was strong. I just signed a couple of new clients. I had a really good March lined up. It was going to be my biggest month of the year probably. Within about 3 days, I lost every client bar one. They all went on hold. They were all very nice about it, but very quickly my customers decided that there was too much risk for them to be investing in anything but really essential stuff. They were naturally trying to protect their business, trying to protect their staff. And so my emotions over the last few weeks have actually not been sad that my business is going slow, although it'd be nice if it wasn't, but I'm sure it'll come back. But more, I've been feeling quite guilty actually, that I'm sitting in the spa watching Netflix, can read books, spend time with my family, and I hear all these horror stories of people spending 12 hours on Zoom calls. And so feel somewhat like I'm not within a group of people who are experiencing things quite the same as me. A lot of people I know in this industry are still working and working harder than ever. And so, yeah, that's a little bit of an insight into where I am at the moment. So sad about my work, but happy and privileged to be able to enjoy a bit of downtime until things pick up. Who wants to pick up? Who wants to tell their sort of journey into COVID and where they're at right now? David, go for it.
Cool, thanks. So I think the slightly different story than yours, Toke. So we started to see quite early on the potential impact for COVID-19 into New Zealand, and as a leadership team started initiating a small working group to explore what we needed to do as an organisation and the various risk profiles for different scenarios and what our appetite and actions should be for each of those. So we built out a pretty robust plan. And then that plan, once the levels structure came out, we fully adjusted that risk profile to fit with the levels approach. As part of the lead-up work, we transitioned to doing remote work for a 3-day trial around the same time as Vodafone did. So we put our all 50 staff into full remote work from home test with what they had right there and then. And the aim was to shake out where there were issues with people's home setups. And the reason for doing it for 3 days was to try and draw out potential work elements that may struggle with remote work as well. And it would force us to do remote team meetings, etc. So a few things came from that for us to improve. Personally, it changed a lot for us at home. So we've got I've got 2 teenage daughters. My wife works part-time as well, and basically with level 4, we ended up with all of us working from home. Kids on laptops doing schoolwork and navigating the trials and tribulations of the whole education sector moving to online learning. My wife and I sharing our lounge as our office, overlapping Zoom meetings and or Google meetings, whatever it was, and just finding ways to create space for each other. So I'm sitting in a corner of our bedroom right now to so that normal family life can continue while I'm still working. Probably the biggest thing for me has been acknowledging that this is not normal remote work, and it's something that we've really pushed through our entire organisation. This is working during a pandemic, and its results in us needing to work remotely, but the pressures, the stresses are very different, and we need to acknowledge that, particularly in terms of the capacity of our teams to be able to do things at home when you've got your entire family also around you, for those that have family at home. And everyone in my team has got either house guest or family to deal with. So there's lots of things bubbling up through that, and that's created its own unique stresses and challenges, but it's also created a lot of benefits as well. I've had the luxury of spending more time with my daughters each day than I normally would in a given work week, and that's created some great opportunities for us to connect. Most days we manage to do lunch together. We always do dinner together, and that's been really cool. With the conversation's a bit different, like how was school today? Isn't quite the same as it used to be. So, and then productivity wise, I have good days and bad days, and a big part of this is just learning to be kind to myself as much as I am to my team, in terms of, if you've got a day where things are just not lining up for you, then that's okay. We're not going to get everything done in the same kind of level of productivity than we would if we weren't in a pandemic environment. So that's my little spiel.
Nice. Thanks, David. Like, if your kids are anything like mine, when I ask them, how was your day at school, it's normally a conversation killer. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nicole, have you been faring?
I have the flip side to David, which is my husband is a high school teacher, so I get to see the other side of that coin, which is him trying to get kids to be more engaged online. But the other struggle for us, we're both working, but I have an 18-month-old son, which as much as I'm really stoked to be spending more time, same as you, David, it's really cool to spend lunch times together, have a lot more family time. I'm also conscious he's absolutely climbing the walls. And so when you're in a job that's pretty demanding, that's hard, because you do, and it's something that I've talked to a lot of my team about too, you feel like you're not working from home, you're living at work. Like, it's very hard to keep those boundaries. And the other thing is that you always kind of feel like you're doing everything a bit terribly. So personally, that's been something I've found really hard, is as much as you think you can balance these two things, in reality, you just feel like you're being pulled in two different directions. Work-wise, though, it's been really interesting. From a TradeMe perspective, we had done a similar thing, David, where we decided to look ahead to what COVID and a potential lockdown could mean for us. But the government announced much tougher e-commerce regulations than we expected. And so we had about 24, 48 hours notice to completely change the way that our website worked in terms of only allowing people to purchase essential goods, which was a massive, massive upheaval, but also a really cool banding together of all our product teams towards a really clear goal. But we also had that sort of side of it, which is, you know, we didn't want to lose all of the inventory that was on site. So how could we strike a balance and have a buyer experience where you could buy things but not have them delivered, and then buy other things and have them instantly delivered? So that's been a really cool sort of challenge for the teams. But it's also meant a lot of late nights, a lot of really, really long hours for our teams, and trying to balance that with, they've all got work-home balances to strike as well. And people do feel a bit guilty if they're not working as hard as each other. And so just being really realistic and nice and saying, hey, look, just do what you can do in your space, and everyone's contribution is a little bit different during this. So yeah, it's been an interesting road.
Yeah. Hey, Car, how about you give us an insight to how you entered this new world?
So we went fully remote, I want to say either the week before lockdown was announced or the week before that. I've lost track of time, sorry. It was tricky before that because I was saying earlier, I have 2 young children, one of which is 3 months old. So I sort of went into like this weird paternity leave, parental leave, and then into sort of back at work very briefly before going fully remote because of the lockdown. And so we were really sort of a lot more careful around what we did because of sort of the challenges of having a newborn. So, you know, so it means that it's different every day here for sure. You know, some days you have, as everyone else has said, like good days, and some days you've got bad days. It's sort of like a really tricky balance to navigate. Some days it's really nice to be close to the family, like just to have the boys upstairs. And then other times it's also just that little bit of comedy relief when your 2-year-old kind of bursts into the spare room going, so who are you talking to now? I get that a lot, like a surprising amount, and my colleagues have been really good about it. Yeah, so we've been really well looked after team-wise, and getting to learn a lot about my colleagues, about what's in their background. You know, like one of the other designers in New York has this fantastic art studio with lots of sort of 3D sculptures on the wall and sort of quite heavy equipment, and learning about what everyone else is also interested in outside of work. You kind of get a little bit of a glimpse of that that way.
Yeah, totally.
And yeah, and just trying to be really aware that everyone's juggling different things, whether it's young children or teenagers, or whether they're by themselves and trying to figure out what to do there, and how to handle that. Like I mentioned before, we have a lot of colleagues in the States, and so like their political situation is really, really different to what we have here, and that sort of makes me doubly grateful that we're really well looked after from a company point of view, but also B, like our sort of political leadership has been doing a phenomenal job, especially by comparison to the States.
Yeah. Hey Ruth, how about you?
I don't know if this is going to make me sound like a dick, but it's honest. So I had to, in the weekend, we had a sort of UX leaders got together, and we had to say 3 words of how we were feeling, and lots of people were sort of like optimistic, enthusiastic, and I'd written down constrained, frustrated, and guilty. And so I kind of like brought the whole party down. I think that, you know, Tokes and I tramping in Kepler and Milford was no sort of accident. Kind of I have worked my life around kind of lots of adventures, lots of being in nature, lots of social stuff, and kind of lots of new experiences. So I've kind of often joked that I'd rather live in a cardboard box and spend all my money on travel and adventures. And so kind of shut down, went, okay, well, you're living in that cardboard box. And so I think so sort of, yeah, current life feels very constrained for me. And I think the guilty there comes for a couple of reasons. One is that on paper, I haven't lost my job. I haven't reduced my hours. I'm living with like my 3 favorite people in the world. I don't live in a cardboard box. And so kind of compared to what other people are struggling with, I've actually got it really lucky, but it doesn't feel like that for my own life. And the other reason that I feel guilty is because I'm with the 3 people that I like the most in their life, but it still doesn't feel like it's good enough. So it's kind of really hard to say to your husband, like, I really love you, but I'm actually really missing like the other people in my life. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. Constrained, frustrated, and guilty.
Oh, that's amazing that you've done a workshop already that sort of delved into how you're feeling. Yeah, look, I guess with all of us, we've got different experiences through the same actual events, and you know, I think you've all mentioned it and touched on it. That empathy for the differences that we're feeling and experiencing is really important. It's like you keep hearing the meme, we're all in this together. Well, we might be, but we might not be all experiencing it in the same way together. And so thank you for sharing that. Hey, Nicole, when you said something that sparked something, which is where I wanted to go for the next set of questions, was around what things are changing in terms of the way you worked. And it was interesting to hear that you were saying you had 2 days to react to a change that had to be put into the product in order for it to be used in the lockdown constraints. And I wonder whether you look back now and think, well, shit, well, you know, if as a product leader I could put that sort of urgency in my team, imagine what we could get done. And you know, that would have normally taken, you know, 2 months of meetings and then a month of actually doing it, and we still wouldn't have got it right. Whereas we actually did it. Now, obviously, it probably killed the team. You want to go that extreme, but did you come away thinking about what it means to have that level of importance and urgency and focus?
Yeah, we absolutely did, and we've actually done retros on what would you bottle out of that and what was really not ideal. And some of it, like, we don't want people working those sorts of hours. You know, that's not a good life work balance. But some of the really positive things were around being clear about who owns decisions and then just letting them get on with it. How we moved at pace because we all knew what the goal was and we all were working really closely to it. So we're trying to take as much of that through to what we do in the normal world for a product. And also just being, some of it was, we just shipped at 80%. We said, look, there's going to be some edge cases here, but we've got most of the value, let's just go. And Ruth, you may have some insights on this one as well, but you know, in bigger organizations, you get quite risk averse and everyone's kind of worried about breaking anything. And we just put that all to one side and we know we will worry about those things later and let's just get the main value across the line. So that was really cool and quite refreshing. And so, yeah, hopeful about bottling some of that and being able to use it longer term.
Do you think it helped you to take that less risk averse approach because you felt your customers would be more forgiving? Did it humanize your customers and they weren't just these angry people wanting you to do it perfectly every time, but they were, you know, they thought you're all in this together, then you had to rush it, and so they'd be forgiving. Did that make it easier?
I think a little bit. Like, there was definitely some conversations where we were like, oh, if we could get these 10 message points across the line, that would be perfect. But if we've got 8 of them, then most people will know what's happening, plus there's the wider context. But there was also stuff around, we actually moved faster because we're all moving in the same direction. And that's the stuff which I think we can take into the long term. There's been product decisions that we've put on hold previously because it's just seemed too hard and it's going to take too much coordination across the business and the technical debt's too high. And some of those things we've re-looked at now and gone, actually, that's a crap excuse. Like, let's just move faster on this. So that's been really nice. And we've been able to take some of that forward.
And how much agency did you and your role have over making some of these coordinating and making decisions? Were you right at the front of that across marketplace? Like, I mean, you're relatively new into that role, so maybe it's too soon to ask, but.
No, not at all. I had to be because we had to move quickly, but it wasn't just me. We have a senior leadership team that worked really quickly and we're really clear on who made which calls. But also because I was coming out of our consumer experience side, which is responsible for homepage and search and those sort of TradeMe products. I've sort of already got that view. So it was kind of this nice melding of I was already the decision maker for a lot of these things. So that was fun. But also, like, I shouldn't be also the bottleneck. So a lot of it was just being really clear on where we're going and then just getting out of the way of a lot of product people and going, get to your part as quickly as possible. So one role that was really, really vital was delivery management. So we had one person that was across all the teams, making sure that as we moved fast, all those pieces came together. One thing I would say is it was definitely more project management than product management. And so I wouldn't want that to be our long-term view, because we just had to say, this is the outcome, build it. And so that's not the best way of doing things long-term.
Yeah, cool. Like a number of you would actually be responsible for not just one team, but multiple teams. And I've heard a lot of people, like when I talk to people about who are running teams and they're remote, and they go, you know, if they're an engineer, they're in like engineer's heaven because they don't get interrupted. They can put their headphones on at home and they can just do their coding. It's almost the perfect environment for them, right? And the product leaders of those teams, if that's their only team, are probably on the fence. Some things are good, some things are bad. I haven't talked to as many people who skim across a number of teams and have to interact with a number of teams. In fact, I think you're probably all in that situation where you all engage with a number of different parts of the organization, not primarily with one team. And I'm wondering whether that has become a lot more difficult through the remote working. Is it harder for you to, you know, I remember the time I was at Xero in that sort of a role where a lot of the intel I got, or the value I thought I could provide, was you know, bumping into Rod in the halls, and I could talk to him about something and then translate that back for the team to understand. Or I might, you know, be lining up for a coffee with our barista, and you know, talk with somebody at the time, you know, just bump into somebody. And those incidental conversations presumably don't happen as easily or as frequently now as your scheduled Zoom calls. And I feel like people in senior roles often live and breathe through those interactions. It's not just, in fact, they spend less time directly with a team and more time outside bringing stuff back to the team. And I'm just wondering if any of you wanted to reflect on how that's changed for how you work as product leaders at a higher level. Anyone can take that.
I think I've kind of got the added thing of being new to an organisation as well, and so there's this. So I was talking to someone else who was at TradeMe, who's also pretty new to Xero, and we're sort of talking about the fact that you're almost missing. You don't know what you don't know. You know, so kind of if I was at TradeMe, I would probably be having Slack conversations, you know, with maybe 10 times as many people as I am. So I feel like I'm kind of, because I don't know what I'm missing, I feel like I'm doing kind of the right things, but you know, yeah, you don't know what else is out there, and it's probably slowing down the getting to know people and getting, or maybe it's even more that you rely on the org chart for kind of getting things done more than the relationships with people and sort of understanding who actually does what.
Yeah, who's the approachable person that who smiled at you when you first walked in, that you could go over and talk to and say, hey, I don't understand this. Like, yeah, for sure. You're nodding, Nicole. Did you experience that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously not new to TradeMe, but sort of returning relatively recently from mat leave and then going into a new area, I've really found that as well. And I think more from those informal connections, like I definitely feel a lot more disconnected from the engineering teams than I would normally, because I don't have any management responsibilities. There's no specific reason for me to have a meeting with them, which is a much higher level to pass with a Zoom meeting. Like if you set up a meeting, you have to have a reason. Whereas normally in the office, I'd just walk past their stand-ups, or I'd go and have a chat to people and to see what people are doing. And so it's harder to get a sense of momentum and vibe.
Totally, yeah. David?
It's probably just 2 points. One is I think with the lack of that kind of informal communication, we've certainly lifted a lot more of the structured communication that we've got happening. So we're probably over communicating in some senses, but through multiple channels. So we've got, you know, org-wide communications that's going out. It's very consistent. It's there's a lot of thought goes into it. As an SLT, we're also making sure that we're connecting with our teams and bubbling up issues quite regularly. But in terms of those interpersonal connections, we've had several new starts come on board in the organisation over the last 6 weeks. So several new staff, and our normal onboarding process is creating lots of those informal coffee chats. And one of the ways for dealing with that has been, for each new staff member that's come on board, there's been effectively an open calendar or document that people can go in and fill out a time to catch up with that person. So for every new person that comes on board, I can go and pick a half-hour time slot sometime in the next couple of weeks And I've had several of those conversations now where you just dial in and have a conversation, go, hey, who are you? How are you going? How's your start in the organisation been? What do you know about the area I work in, and what can I share to help you understand more? So there's been lots of trying to create those connections through structured means because we just don't have that informal opportunity to catch up. Yeah.
I was thinking about your role, Car, in design, where maybe you're more used to working as a designer across many teams anyway, and maybe you've already built up some skills and resilience to teams feeling remote to you. I don't know.
Yeah, so we've had a couple of advantages, I guess, in terms of coming into the situation where because the mothership is in New York, a lot of our meetings are really structured. So my day is the sort of multiple Zoom calls in the morning. And like David touched upon earlier, sort of preparing for this over communicating by default is really important. I have a lot of regular syncs with multiple feature teams, not just with the product managers, but also with the tech leads, just to make sure that sort of I understand what they're seeing as technical or product limitations right now, and what we need to do. I also have like this secret agenda, or not so secret agenda, of trying to like push the consistency of our front end while delivering these features. So I make it like a strong point of every time I do something that I have another thing that I need them to be mindful of. And on the note of sort of over communicating, design has always at SailThru anyway has always been a little bit under the radar, and so we're using a couple of new tools and methods at the moment where I can almost get everyone to see what I'm working on an almost daily basis. So like warts and all, work in progress. And the advantage that has actually is not so much what I'm doing, but what the other teams have coming up on their radar. So it sort of creates a far more broad conversation rather than having me in the center.
Yeah. Cool. I had AJ's comment there because it was relevant to what we were talking about in terms of what people often, because you have to schedule these things, it feels like things are going slower. Have you experienced that, or do you feel? I've actually had other people say the opposite, where they go, "It's great, we communicate really well now, and we get to the point really quickly." You know, how have you guys experienced this sort of meeting overload that you may be feeling? David.
Meeting overload's been a really hot topic for us in the last probably 3 weeks. I've come off the back of some days where I've had like 7 hours of meetings, and talking with people is a big part of my job, and the main mechanism for that is now meetings. But we've been looking at how we as an organization embrace asynchronous work more fully, and as a result restructure the way we do meetings. So there's been some, what I think it looks like pretty good practice overseas, where remote work's embedded as a normal way of operating, where asynchronous work's really heavily embraced. You put out good thought pieces, allow people to interact online over a day or so, and then bring a meeting together to make a decision or to discuss a specific aspect. And the meetings themselves then can be a lot shorter because you've already nutted through a lot of what would be a discussion. It's quite a different approach, where perhaps you're used to tossing an idea around in a meeting and then getting to an outcome. But I think it's a way of us trying to navigate less screen time and allowing people to operate in their own different personal time zones. With all families, etc., people have got different pressures that are happening around them, and it's much harder to have these scheduled meetings that run for long periods of time.
And are other people, are you finding you're documenting more in order to try and mitigate some of this, like David suggested? I've heard that before. Is that common?
So, well, from our perspective, we're seeing a lot of Google Docs spin up quite quickly, often just for the purpose of facilitating that conversation. And then it might transfer to a wiki or to some other kind of documentation later once the decision's made. But I think the async stuff definitely is a biggie. And I think someone else put in the comment there about the informal coffee chats. I do a daily coffee check-in with my team. We try not to talk about work at all. It's how's the sleep going? How are the kids? Whose cat kept them up last night? And just trying to check in with the the humans that we are, and just put work aside a little bit.
Yeah, I like Sarah's cheeky mocker. Yeah, I think that's it's kind of good to, because you totally missed that, right? Like again, this is where I feel guilty again, because I've been working in my own business on my own for a lot of time. So my cheeky mockers are like going and having coffee with somebody in town, which I do really miss. But I guess you guys are feeling that even more when you work, especially if you work for an organization with hundreds of people in it. It's a distinct, sharp drop in connection with people. I'm trying to read through some of these comments, see which other ones are. Thank you everyone for putting comments in the stream. It's really good to feel like you're part of the conversation. I was talking about opening a Zoom room that anyone on the team could drop into at any time for 10 minutes for chats. It's kind of a nice idea as well. Anyone else experimenting with that on the panel?
Yeah, we've got a pinned to the top of our Team Slack channel as a standard Google meeting room, and whenever we need to jump in, we can either, if it's a multi-person one, we'll just use that rather than have to set up a meeting. It's just one that's a standing one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I find that Slack calls are a little faster for that, like lower friction, but also trying to just actually, I just find video calls really exhausting, especially if like you, David, you have like 7 hours in an 8-hour day. So trying to consciously take some as phone calls, so it's not always video, but also then I can walk around and get some fresh air at the same time, so just split it up. There's a question there about, the panel asynchronous communication. So yeah, I don't put it in long form email because that definitely doesn't get read at TradeMe, but that's what David was saying, a lot more Google Docs, so that you can have your opinion in it, but be really structured about what the feedback is you're asking. So I'll kind of call out, hey, this is a question we need to answer. Let's have a think about these points. But it's not like a one-way form of communication.
We have lobbies in our team that you can kind of go in and socially chat. But we had an interesting situation the other day where a woman was in my team was in the middle of doing a really deep analysis, and she was like, "Does anyone just want to hang out while I do my analysis?" And it was really nice because we were all actually on mute unless someone arrived in the room, and then we're like, "Hey, how's it going?" Then we all go back on mute. But suddenly you've got 4 faces who are completely focused on their work at the same time, and so it was the sort of closest to mimicking a real work environment where you're getting energy from other people working around you, even though you're not actually kind of doing any kind of interaction.
Yeah, that's funny.
Probably for us extroverts, I think.
Yeah, one like cafes or offices or something. It's just that idea of other people working.
Yeah, particularly she's like, I just can't concentrate when it's just me. I need like other people, with that same vibe around me.
There's a website you can go to, right, where you put your headphones on, you plug in, and it has the sounds of a cafe or an airport, or a schoolyard, just random noise of people who are busy and doing stuff around you. There's a science behind the extent to which that does increase your productivity, as opposed to, just sitting in the quiet room. Yeah. Now I wanted to turn the conversation a little bit to, I provocatively called the title something like "COVID, it's changed everything." For a lot of people I've talked to, I'm not getting the sense that that's actually true for everybody, or that people are feeling the extent to which it maybe is true, and then is maybe not feeling it yet. And there's not a business alive, I think, that hasn't had to ask the question, what does this mean for us? And it means you could be working for foodstuffs, right? It could mean really good stuff for you, for your business, or it could be that you're working in Queenstown trying to get a job at foodstuffs. And so I'm wondering how you guys have experienced the change in conversation at the company level. Like, what is the company having to do to change, and how are you A, contributing to that, and B, impacted by that, if at all? Maybe you're still in business as usual, you had a backlog you need to get through anyway. Like, does anyone want to sort of kick that off, that sort of conversation about how in touch you are with any strategic redirection that's happening? David, I know you've been thinking about this.
Yeah, I think for us, our business predominantly from a commercial perspective is the operation of the .nz domain name space, and We anticipate, I can talk about that a bit later in terms of what we're seeing in terms of how New Zealand's responding for pivoting to online businesses. But for us internally, what we saw with COVID was the need to get really focused, have a really clear sense of what are the things we need to focus on in the next probably 3 to 4 months. We've got some sort of longer running strategic goals, which are pivotal to how we structure our work. But we needed to get into what's the short-term stuff we need to be really focused on, how do we communicate that, and then how do we manage our work around these things. And so we've got 4 essential priorities, which is looking after our people, looking after .nz, which is an essential service for New Zealand, operates about 70% of the namespace in New Zealand, and most of our core websites. Sharing the stories, so being really clear about how we can help amplify the good things that are happening in this space, and calling out the things that need to happen, and investing to help. So we last year invested about $850,000 in grants and sponsorships as a result of COVID. Well, we're lifting up to $1 million this year, and our council elected to add another $500,000 on top of that, and to provide COVID-related response to the internet community. So for us, it was getting really sharp on our key priorities, and using that as a kind of North Star for now, and finding ways to make sure that any work bubbling out of that, we've got really crystal clear ways of helping prioritize that against other things. And we're still working through how we do that, but it's helped give us some clarity, I guess, about what we should be doing. Sorry.
Yeah.
I think one of the hardest things always in product management is prioritization, right? And you would have all seen that kind of joke that went around of who drove your remote strategy in your organization, your CEO, your CIO, or COVID. And I think but there's potentially some truth there around prioritization of product, what you're going to do in your product as well, because there's nothing like, sometimes it's too easy to give a little bit to this and a little bit to this and a little bit to this. And so when you know that you actually have to really be sure about the kind of specific things you're going to focus on, it may be the kind of for product companies that can make it through, it may be a bit of a silver lining.
Yeah, I reckon as well. We had a week or so ago, Dan and I had another stream where we talked about how more established companies could behave and learn from the way in which startups operate. And one of the stark differences between a startup is that survival for them could be a week or a month away if their idea doesn't get traction, or they don't raise money, or a whole lot of other things that could add them to the scrap heap of failed startups. Whereas in established companies, you've already got some revenue. That urgency is no longer felt as keenly as for a startup. Yes, when COVID comes along, for some companies, not all of them, but for some companies, they absolutely feel the sharp sort of pain of survival instincts kicking in, because their business may not survive this. And I think it's kind of interesting that it's forcing people, much like Nicole's example, where you had 2 days to do something to enable people to sell essential items, right? It adds a sharpness and a keenness to your the way you think about your product that is very rarely there. And I think if there's something I'm picking up, it's like we need to maybe as product leaders create a sense of, not a sense of, oh my God, the world's falling, we've got to get that feature out. Not that, but to actually express it in a way that creates a sense of importance that COVID is giving us for free. Yeah, can we generate some of that importance ourselves in the work that we do and the leadership we provide for our teams? Because it's so easy to just see a 2-month-long backlog of features that you don't believe in and lose all hope, right? Like it's just really common, and just how we can create that new energy.
There's probably 2 things to riff off that, Tokes, is at the portfolio level, we've gone through our entire project list as an organization and gone, what needs to stay on track? What can slow down due to either internal or external constraints? What can we pause, and what should we stop? And as in cease entirely, because it's no longer relevant. So we've been able to communicate back to our teams, a long list of stuff, which often used to freak people out about how can we get all those things done, and we get through it. But go back and say, actually, this is a much trimmed back list of things that we're really actively focused on. then on the product specific things, one of our new products that we launched late last year, and we're spending the first quarter of this year building out our sales pipeline. The sales pipeline's completely dried up. We hit a brick wall as everybody just shifted their focus to COVID response. Now we could have taken the approach of going, we have to urgently do something about solving this now. No one was in the mood to listen. The comms that were going out there was just so much noise around COVID, pivoting online, remote working, and so we're going, actually, let's just hold our horses here and see what we can see where things are going. And we're looking at putting out an offer for the product for the next probably 5 months to make it freely available, because it does have value that it can add, and just as a way of returning some value back to the community. But we didn't see the need to react instantly, and so sometimes I think it's being able to read what's happening and going, do we have to respond right now, or can we just wait a little bit longer?
I'm interested in, actually, SailThru is probably the company I know least about. Are the fundamentals that are being affected by COVID in terms of how you're acquiring new customers, how you're retaining customers? How's the business reacting to all this?
So I don't think things are going to return to normal anytime soon. So we see a spectrum of clients that are just trying their best to get through like what's a really difficult time for them. And on the other hand, we also have clients who are having sort of really interesting opportunities emerge. So one of our clients is edX, and like they're seeing just a massive growth in terms of like who they're sending to. And different clients have sort of identified different pockets of sort of opportunity. So we see that breadth right now. Like our fundamentals hasn't changed. I don't think our product vision has changed that much. We're still here to sort of create the best experience and the best value that we have for our clients. And what we're trying to do right now is just adapting to our clients' needs as best as we can. So whether it's helping them navigate this tough time or sort of maximizing the opportunity that they have.
And is the visibility of those conversations clear to, I talked to someone, I won't say who it is, I talked to somebody not that long ago, and they said that they worked in a relatively small organization, and they said they've never felt as close to the business purpose and the decisions around direction than they did post-COVID, where it felt like they were feeling like this was more a sense of team now. It wasn't just the founders making all these decisions. They felt like it was a much more integrated sense of importance, because they really were having to think hard about how they would survive. Maybe your businesses are secure enough in their future that they're not having emergency meetings of, oh my God, how are we going to survive till next week? But are you finding there's a different, are you involved in different conversations or more connected to those conversations than you were pre-COVID? Or, I mean, you don't have to be. Like, it could be that it's just the same as it always was and you're always connected or disconnected.
Yeah, I don't think...
You've always been connected at the SLT level, so whatever happened in the market, you'd be involved in those conversations. Is that fair? That was involved. Yes, everyone was cooking dinner and didn't see David.
So I think for me, I personally, I'm quite connected to those decisions, and and it really hasn't been a massive shift. But for our teams, however, I think there's been a lot more communication towards our teams and getting really clear on the why of specific decisions. So that people have got a lot of clarity about why we're choosing to focus on particular things, what the impact is, and dealing with issues and challenges as they pop up. I think one of the biggest focus, and as part of that comms, has been just to acknowledge the need to be kind to each other, because as the comms go out, we tend to bubble up stuff as well. So as stuff comes back, it sort of needs to be seen in the right light in terms of, we're all trying to do the right things here.
And it's a massive opportunity, right? Like, there's the biggest complaint that I hear is that people feel disconnected from strategy, or they go, there is no strategy. I can't wait for the senior team to give me some strategy to work against, right? And so there's this sort of sense of not being part of it, and that it needs to be created by something else outside of you. in order for you to do your product strategy. Whereas now, if you consider strategy being what's an obstacle in my way to get to these goals that I need to make, what hypotheses do I need to run to get past that obstacle, and what actions am I going to take, in the sort of good strategy, bad strategy framing, then it's pretty clear what the obstacle is for most companies right now. Like, nobody's going to debate that most companies are having to create a strategy because the entire planet is in lockdown. Like, it's affected every company in some way, right? And so I love the fact that there's this complete lack of ambiguity now about what the pillar of your strategy is. And if there's product people out there who don't have COVID-19 as a obstacle or opportunity ahead of them to drive a strategy around, then it feels like you're not having the right conversation yet, or the company's not ready yet to have those sort of transparent, strategic conversations around, this is our reality now. And without COVID, it was much harder to articulate, right? Because you had to sort of make a decision and say, well, the biggest opportunity or the biggest problem right now is that we're not growing fast enough in the US, or whatever. Something that was perhaps a little less behemoth than COVID-19. And so I guess I was just trying to pick up whether that increased clarity of challenge and opportunity is creating focus for you and the teams in a way it didn't before.
It certainly is in the .NZ part of our business. I think we've, over the past year, we've been exploring various methods to trying to generate growth in the .NZ namespace. We're a really mature market. We turned 25 this year, so we're not a startup. We hold a dominant part of the market, and we're starting to see the top end of that curve in terms of maturity. So trying to create massive change, and that's really challenging. COVID's actually had more of a positive impact on the .NZ namespace than any marketing efforts that we could do. In April, we saw a 50% growth in creation of new domain names as people are looking to create websites, create new opportunities, and pivot online. So there's been some really interesting stuff there. The challenge for us is how do we, and looking at our 4 essential priorities, sharing the stories and looking after .NZ, two of those. So what's our role in helping New Zealand businesses navigate the online space? And there's a lot we can do there. And back to Nicole's point about what's good enough in terms of shipping, we're working with an agency at the moment to go, and the reason we're using an agency is we just don't have the capacity to do it in-house right now. So we're going, we need to do something, let's find some capacity to help us, and what's good enough to get out there. And so in the next couple of weeks, we'll have some guidance and some collateral with a kind of education and an awareness focus. If we were to do it to the good, better, best kind of angle, the best would be, big microsite, doing lots of whiz-bang stuff, but we just don't have the space to do that right now. So looking at what we can do that's impactful, but sort of not going to kill people in the same process.
Yeah. And so have your roadmaps changed as a result of the last few weeks?
In terms of the product, so we've got a kind of product innovation pipeline. So we've got a backlog of lots of interesting ideas to explore. We generally have about 2 to 3 things on the go that we're sort of exploring and validating. And what we've chosen, because we've got a reduced capacity as a team, and we've got a clear vision of things that we should be focusing on right now, we've pared back what we're working on. So we've actually put pause on a couple of the explore and validate areas, even though they're sort of interesting and will generate benefit. We're focusing on just 2 specific products right now outside of our existing product portfolio. One's looking at a new security feature for .NZ, and one's exploring a service around digital identity. And that's not going to turn into something in the next couple of months. It's looking at, as we come out of COVID, what's the kind of curve that we could be seeing some opportunities in. And I think that kind of digital identity space of the other things that we're exploring is the one that we're probably going to get the most runs with. So we're sort of reshaped our priorities to focus on some of the things that we think will get more legs as we come out of this.
Yeah. And Nicole, did you inherit a roadmap from your predecessor? Like, how have you moved into this role? Or is this actually an opportunity for you to go, well, you might have had a plan, but boy, have I got a plan now?
It's a little bit of that. There's been a bit of a gap in this head of product role in Marketplace for a while. And so there were pretty good sort of business unit strategies that hadn't really been fleshed out on how we were going to deliver on this from a product perspective. And so I actually think some of our strategic direction still remains the same, but how we're going to solve for it changes. We're sort of a little bit like you, David, where some of this is an opportunity. And while Marketplace is only a portion of what TradeMe does, and we're obviously struggling in things like the property market and jobs and other areas of business that are worse affected, for Marketplace, there's actually been quite a big uplift in e-commerce, and we see more opportunities for TradeMe being based locally and being able to sort of combine our platform with book a courier and payments and things like that. So I think we're still heading in the same direction, but how we solve those customer problems is going to evolve.
Has there been, if I think of the TradeMe model, I think there's such a massive dependence on the New Zealand market, obviously, and I know over the years, and I know nothing, right? So this is not secret. I assume you've talked about moving into Australia and going outside of New Zealand. Have any of those conversations resurfaced? Has the exposure you have to the success or failure of the New Zealand market been discussed much?
Yeah. And I mean, I think you were talking earlier about getting people closer to decision making, and what's been interesting out of this is because everyone in TradeMe wants to help, everyone's got an idea, and everyone wants to know how we're going to solve for this. So we've actually had a Slack channel that's open to anyone in the company to suggest an idea, and then we've got a transparent process around how we prioritize those. And we're pretty explicit, like 90% of them won't get worked on, and for the sort of small amount that have, we've been able to give people an idea of how that process has evolved and what we've done with that idea. And that one about going international has been brought up a couple of times. It's the obvious one, like let's just have a bigger market. But we're also pretty confident on what makes TradeMe good, and it's our audience and our connection to New Zealand. And so going and competing in an audience somewhere else is probably going to be pretty costly. And when everyone's looking at retaining costs and doing better where they are, it's not a strategy we're pursuing at this stage.
Yeah.
I'm actually allowed to do things like that.
Yeah.
So now on YouTube, you're fine.
Yeah.
But yeah,
these ideas. It's more interesting from the perspective of no idea is a bad idea at the moment, but being really clear with people about how we weigh those ideas up and what is important to us, and just keeping going back to we've only got a certain number of teams, and it's actually more important that we're all heading in the same direction and not fragmenting our effort.
Yeah, but I like that. I mean, that sounded like that was an idea you had to share ideas even before COVID. Have you seen an acceleration of people feeling, putting ideas forward?
I think it's been really more about the COVID response, and it's about everyone being curious about how other businesses are responding. So what I would say is less about the ideas and more about the curiosity. I'm seeing a lot more conversations around Slack around, hey, have you seen this competitor startup? Have you seen this platform doing this? This is really cool from overseas. As a product team, we're spending a lot more time looking at how e-commerce is performing in the States and in China to see what other trends are coming through and whether this is a short-term blip or something longer term. So we've been tracking how e-commerce is going in China, and even after the lockdown, people aren't going back to physical stores. So sort of seeing that as things that we might see in New Zealand.
But I think that's a really healthy change, right? Going from, hey, I've got this great idea. I don't even know what conditions we're in, but I think this little feature was an amazing idea. Going from that to, hey, I've been exploring the landscape and researching what's happening out there in the world, and I think there's an opportunity here because this is what e-commerce is doing. Like, that's research, right? That's like statistical analysis of diagnosing the scenario and context you're within in order to make good decisions about what to build. And the fact that you have people change from not what to build, but why, where the opportunities might lie and who knows what we'll do in it, I think is a super healthy change in behavior if that's happening.
And what's been also really interesting is we started all watching our dashboards and our scorecards really intensely because everything fell off the cliff with the lockdown. And then as things have picked up, people are actually looking at it because they're curious and they're going, oh, hey, look, this category's gone up. Why do you think people are buying that? So it's been, I think the curiosity has been interesting.
Yeah, if you're a data geek or an analytics geek, then you'll be loving it, right?
Yeah.
I'd concur with the curiosity aspect. We're certainly seeing folks within our organisation who probably sometimes take the .nz part of our organisation for granted. It's just it's our core revenue stream, but for a lot of folks, it's not the core work they do day to day, because we've got a lot of kind of social enterprise, community work, policy work we do as well. And we're seeing a lot of folks here jumping into Slack going, exactly as Nicole said, hey, look, this is happening. Why do you think that might be? Or they're observing people in our market, doing promotions around helping businesses get online and sharing all of that information. And it all creates a richness of the conversation and improves the understanding about what we're seeing. And it's actually really exciting seeing people get really involved in our core business.
Yeah,
totally. Sort of from a product leadership perspective, I think it's really important that then we give insights into how we prioritize those and have a feedback loop. So it's not just people feel like they're throwing ideas out into the void. And sometimes people just want to know it's being thought of. So one thing we've been trying to be more transparent about is our scenario planning for going from level 4 to level 3, and then from level 3 to level 2, saying these are the conversations that are happening. This is what we're expecting to happen, so that squads don't feel like it's all of a sudden just landed at their doorstep, that we are considering it before it's an emergency.
Yeah, nice. What about Xero, Ruth? Are they? I'm just naturally curious because I spent a lot of time there. I often think that small business, if you were going out of business, you'd still keep your accounting package until the very last moment, right? And I wonder whether you're feeling anything, or whether it's more about finding those opportunities to support small business rather than save your own business.
Yeah, I think that it's been a really nice kind of solidification of who we care about, because small businesses are everything to us. So we need to kind of, and I think it's sort of, in some ways it's, there's product strategy, but there's also kind of the mission of your organization. There's the values of the organization. And sometimes those things, you can show them up more as leaders in the hard times than you can in the good times. It's really easy to live your values in the good times. And so showing some of those values when the going gets tough is even more important. So yeah, we've kind of had the same things. I wasn't involved in this. It was in Australia. They've got a kind of job keeper package, but it was sort of we needed to really quickly work around kind of what that meant, how we're actually going to, because there was a lot of stuff to work through how we were going to actually help people be able to really quickly get that support and get that help. And it's those kind of things that then you get amazing feedback from the users. About kind of, and it's not about putting extra features in the products, or it's not about the things that we think are kind of going to be. It's about like really showing that we care kind of when it matters. And so I think then that just becomes a real reinforcing sort of part of it, is just sort of how, everything we do has to be for our customers, which is, perfect for me, because that's sort of, that's what I care about the most.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember talking to you when we were tramping along a ridge line, which seems like decades ago, but was only 6 weeks. And I remember you were talking about your plans for the team. You were going to be, you wanted to build up how you help them grow muscle in their own way of working, and you had milestones that you were chasing. Has that changed, or were they at a principal place?
Yeah, that's absolutely changed. So yeah, I spent the kind of first 3 months, it's kind of a big joke, right? Well, for us, our start of our new strategy year is the 1st of April. So it's kind of funny that COVID came at the end of March to just sort of think, you think you can control your leg? Yeah, good luck with that. So yeah, I've had to kind of, and I think it's sort of in that process of not knowing as well is really difficult, because you can't actually go, okay, here's the new situation, and now what am I going to do with part of that? But building up the team is definitely something that we've kind of, I want our research team to be the best research team in New Zealand. That means going international, gathering lots of, actually being at the forefront of lots of that staff. Had people at conferences on, at the end of March who had to suddenly sort of not do those. And so one of the things that we've started is a lockdown learning session each fortnight, where we're actually building it up within ourselves and using kind of the expertise within our team while we see what that new landscape is.
Yeah, it's a beautiful example of where your goals for your team haven't changed. So the the outcomes you would like to achieve for you and your team are the same, but now you're going to have to create different outputs and different means through which to achieve those same outcomes that you were striving for, right? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Kind of reminds you not to get too wedded to the things.
Yeah, and also I've realized you have to give yourself a little bit of time to mourn that, particularly, you know, kind of like growth and international travel were the things that I was like, I cannot believe I'm at this company, like, you know, is this for real? And then kind of, you know, both of those sort of get pretty big question marks over them pretty quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess that's kind of a good segue to kind of a final area I wanted to talk about, which was things that you've changed or adapted for out of necessity that you would like to keep doing because you think they actually have a really positive glow on the way you work as a team. As an example, I listened to a podcast recently. I'm trying to remember the company that was being talked to. It was a company that had been working 100% remote since day dot, right? They built their company up to be remote. They were remote advocates. I think they were even, they were open source. They were kind of like the hippies of IT startups who just love this stuff, right? And they were saying they had the extreme view that they thought being remote is better than being together. And so from them, they were advocating that people should force themselves to be remote because they saw huge benefits in the way in which you communicate, the clarity of communication, the auditability of that communication, the offline, the asynchronous nature of it at times. And so I'm wondering, you may not have that extreme viewpoint of the benefits of being remote, but are there things that you're thinking about, man, actually, I don't want to go back to the way it was. I like some of what we're doing now, and maybe just spin on that idea for a bit. Carl, why don't you, have you got some stuff, Carl, that you want to share that you think we should keep doing this?
We've touched on a lot of those things already. I think it's around empathy for our customers or empathy for our clients, making sure that we're sort of focused on what their needs are and sort of what they're wanting to achieve. For me personally, the biggest change I've made, and the one thing I'm going to try my best to sort of maintain, is sort of really consciously taking the time to connect with my colleagues. So a lot of the time it's really easy to just like talk about work things during the work week, and then on like a Monday you go, like, how was your weekend, and just really quickly skim through that small talk. But it's not, you can't just have small talk anymore. I'm trying really hard to connect sort of one-on-one to try and understand how they're doing personally, outside of work, what that situation is like, and sort of making more space for that in our one-on-one conversations or in our team conversations. Yeah.
I a woman who Nicole will know as well, called Rachel Garrett, is one of the contact center leaders for Shopify, and everyone works remote. And so when I first came to Xero, I hadn't had remote teams before. Well, sort of one person in Auckland, but not quite the same as, sort of people in New York and people all over the place in different time zones. And so I kind of got lots of advice from her. And one of the things she said is, if anyone's remote, everyone's remote. And I couldn't, I agreed with it in theory, but I couldn't quite actually bring myself to do it. And so, but I think kind of this is that truly, and you do kind of see the benefits of that. And so, I think for me, I will kind of try that. Why should some people be reading body language in a room and other people not be, where we've seen that actually conversations happen well, and sometimes conversations happen slower and nicer in remote, because you actually are waiting for each other to take turns rather than sort of talking over each other and sort of jumping in and out.
I've been thinking about that one because that sounded really good to me. I've heard that a few times now, where people go, it's either all remote, there's a couple of people at home, then everyone stays at their desks and logs into the Zoom call. And it kind of feels good because you're bringing everyone, in many ways, down to the lowest denominator, right? So everyone's equally negatively impacted, if you like. But the other idea I heard was that you might alternate. So 1 week, an entire team might be working from home, so they get extra time with their family. They don't do the commute. They just literally work in COVID isolation for a week. And then the next week they're physically in the office, and they all make a commitment to being in the office. And I wonder whether any of you have either in the past or considering that kind of approach as well?
Our COVID team, our COVID response team, focused on what our level 2 is going to look like. And that's conversations we'll be having up in the coming days. That's going to explore things like having, rostering people in and out of the office. But I think one of the kind of underlying principles we need to challenge is whether or not an entire team can be together. And if an entire team is not going to be together physically, that means that some are going to be remote. The idea of if someone's remote, all's remote, which I actually am sort of leaning quite heavily towards now, is a way of ensuring that the whole team's on the same level. It might mean that things like level 2, which could run for a period of time, means that we exist potentially in a more kind of remote state. But I just wanted to reinforce Kaz's point around taking the time to really empathise with our team members and understand, what's happening in their world. Totally agree. And if that's one thing I was going to take into beyond COVID, is just taking more time, with each of my team members.
Yeah, absolutely. Nicole, anything you're going to keep doing?
Yeah, just to see what David and Kyle were saying, I like that I've got to know my team members on a sort of more personal basis than I would. I think there's something really intimate about seeing around someone's house and seeing their pets and their kids and all those sorts of things as well. So it does breed more empathy. We kind of talked about it at the start, but there's a lot for me as an extrovert and someone who really likes bringing teams together that I struggle to adapt to remote situations, particularly getting a whole team on the same page and talking product strategy and those sorts of things. But I think we're starting to figure out how to adapt to this new world quite well.
Yeah, who would say they're an introvert versus an extrovert on the call? Who sees themselves as an extrovert? Yeah. All of you.
It's not a very diverse panel, Tokes.
Well, yeah. Didn't think to filter people on. I'm the only introvert here that can take the call. Yeah, that's interesting in terms of do you think it's impacted you more as the classic sense of introverts? They quite like being alone and they don't need to recharge with other people as much. Are you finding it personally hard? Are you finding you have to use different means to connect with people?
For me, it's defining different means, and I think exercise has probably been the. So I get energy from being with other people, and also get energy from doing exercise. So I've had to really double down on hunting out the endorphins to keep the kind of energy levels up. That's also to offset the huge amount of baking that's happening in the house as well, though.
Yeah, I've got introverted people on my team who are living their best life, and so I think that's kind of the interesting thing is you've got people's situation, have they got kids, have they got, and then you've got people's sort of mindset, and it's kind of any combination of those means that anyone in your team could be kind of, every person on your team is so much more different than or they feel more different than when they'd all sort of show up to work, which is actually probably they're not that different. It's just that your understanding of those differences are just so much easier to see.
Yeah, and it's not that binary, right? While I might say I'm an introvert, I still miss meeting people, having those coffees, bumping into friends in the streets, meeting clients. It's not like I never want to see another human ever in my life, and that this is amazing. But you're right. There's different people will react differently to being kept in captivity for a certain amount of time, right?
You can tell it from the people who were really grumpy, that had to go from, I don't feel like we should go from level 4. I'm like, are you kidding me?
Get out of here.
We should definitely stay at home for longer.
Yeah. I really miss whiteboarding with my colleagues, sort of that elbow to elbow, a little bit of jostling. We're talking about the same thing at the same time.
Yeah.
I miss that a lot, and I stole a little whiteboard from work to bring home so I could at least have the markers with me. It's true. Not quite the same though.
I hadn't thought about that, and I hadn't thought about how I kind of like a good whiteboard session, and in our office, we built this office and there's a whiteboard, and my daughter, who I've been doing her maths homework with her, I just realized how I just got such a huge amount of satisfaction describing something on the whiteboard to her.
I'm finding a Jamboard and an iPad is my kind of way of dealing with that. So we've got like a virtual whiteboard that you can draw on in a session. And I think we ran a team retro last week using Jamboard for the first time doing a team session. And to try and keep the meeting as concise as possible, we actually tried doing it as an asynchronous activity. So we set up the board, set up the parameters for what kind of questions we wanted folks to focus on, allowed a couple of days for the board to get populated, and then spent the time in the retro working through those responses and sort of the key actions and learnings from it. So I miss whiteboards too. I love drawing on a whiteboard.
The other thing I'm really missing is just previous to lockdown, I'd done a strategy around the consumer experience side, and I'd taken over a full physical wall in our office. And what we'd put on one side was like basically all the questions that we had. And then as we started to bring in data and qualitative evidence, we built that around the question and then progressed it along. And so the thing that was really fun about it is because it was huge and physical, people were coming up to us and really interested in how we were forming the strategy and where it was going, and they'd have their own ideas and gone, oh, have you seen this piece of research that I can add to it? And there's just, it sometimes feels like it's a bit more closed off because you have to be invited into the document. And it's a little harder to have that spontaneous sort of, hey, we're working on this thing. Do you want to just give your 2 cents?
Yeah, totally. I'm getting a little bit worried for Chloe, who's saying she's got post-it notes all over her living room. I think we might need to get some help, Chloe. Let's call in later. We'll see what we can do.
It's satisfying if other people can't see your post-it notes. I need to share them.
True. Hey, look, we're almost out of time. Was there anything you wanted to get off the chest before we wrap up? Or thank you very much, by the way, for your time. That was super interesting.
Pleasure.
I've just really enjoyed hearing from you. I've really enjoyed hearing others' perspectives as well. So thank you, Nicole. I want to have a chat with you about a few ideas that have popped up. So I'll chat to you offline.
Sounds great.
It's a win-win. All right.
Yeah.
Hey, thank you very much, everyone. Before you all go, and there's still a few people online who might want to know that in 3 weeks we've got World Product Day. So every year, Mind the Product have a World Product Day, and so in the middle of trying to work out what we're going to be doing for that. But we might, I think we may be able to join forces with. Actually, Anthony's here. We might be joining forces with Auckland, who are organising a speaker that I won't let the cat out of the bag yet, but. It could be kind of a good session that we have online then, and do a bit of a New Zealand World Product Day thing. So yeah, stay tuned for that. 3 weeks time, and we'll be able to see each other all again. So thanks to everyone who joined. It was a good number, good turnout. So thank you for spending some of your evening with us. And
thank you. That was really interesting. Cheers, team.
Thanks.
No, thanks for organizing.
Ka kite anō.